Hello and welcome to Transformed. I'm your host, Josh McMullen, and today I want to introduce my first guest. I kind of hinted at it a little bit over the last couple months, but just wanted to fully introduce my very first interview, and it's going to be Sasha Eaborn, and we're going to go over her transformation and how God is using her right now. So just want to welcome Sasha.
Hi, thank you.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Sasha. Last name is Eaborn. I'm 30 years old now. Crazy to think about. But I am a wife to Carmen, and we have a daughter together, Scarlett, who is 2. She's about 2.5 now. But we're a family of 3, and that's a big part of my life. They are my world. So,
Where are you working?
I work for the Grant County Rescue Mission. I've been there for 4 years now. And I love my job. I love what I do. I love that I get to work with the community. I get to talk about the story of the rescue mission, like what they do. And also sometimes I talk about my story and the transformation that has taken place in my life. God is a big part of that because it is, ministry. So, but yeah, I love what I do. I feel like God really led me there for a reason.
I think that's actually a perfect segue into my first question. So how has God transformed your life?
Yeah, I can go into a pretty lengthy discussion here, but I think I'm going to break it down into one word, and that is restoration. He restored my life. God restored my life completely. My life lacked relationship with the Lord for a long time. I made poor decisions early on in my life that led me to guilt and shame. And I was really embarrassed and lost in like a pit of darkness. I was going through very difficult mental health related illnesses that I really did not have under control at all. I would say from the time I was 19 to the age of 24, I lost all sense of who I was as a person. I became a young girl who I didn't recognize, and that was very scary. When I was going through some of those tough life problems, I was really on autopilot, but I was barely surviving. I actually wasn't surviving. I was falling. And I can go into more of that and what that looked like, but I can tell you that God pulled me from the darkness and into the light. Amen. And that is just incredible to think about, like, how does God pull you from the darkness and into the light?
Right.
Well, he actually spoke those words to me.
Wow.
And so one night, and I was on house arrest at the time, and I can talk more about that at some point in time, if any of those who are listening is interested. But I was alone upstairs. I was living at home with my parents. I was actually in their bathroom upstairs, and actually that was kind of like my getaway, where, like, people often talk about like a prayer room.
Right.
Like that was that for me. Sitting on the bathroom floor and just kind of like either praying or crying.
Right.
But yeah, I was in my parents' bathroom. I was on the floor. I had the light turned off. And in that moment, I really felt just so alone that I wanted to give up fighting. And it was really in that moment, in the puddle of my tears, where he whispered to me. And I'm never going to forget this, Josh. Like, this is the moment where God spoke to me in such an intimate way that I could not make it up. Right. It was a God moment.
It's a changing moment, life-changing moment.
For sure. So, like I said, I was on the floor in the bathroom and crying, and he whispered to me these words. I know you were scared. I know you felt alone, and I know you fought for your life, but you are not alone. I am with you, and I will carry you from the darkness and into the light.
That's amazing.
I was just shown his incredible love, his incredible forgiving love, just in that moment. Like, all the mistakes that I had made, all of the bad decisions that I had made. Like in that moment, he showed me like, it's okay. Like you are a human. You're going to make mistakes, but I'm here for you. And I just remember like thinking like, how good is God? You know, like how, right. And I was so grateful in that moment that like he showed that to me. And it wasn't like he really showed that to me. It was right. more like him speaking to me, you right. know, but it gave me just like the security that right. I was needing in that moment. I just needed to know you were there with me and I was not alone and I was not fighting those battles alone.
You know, that really reminds me a lot of like the story of Elijah, right? Where even though we have a lot of stuff going on, Elijah was in the depths of depression and despair and really thought his life was on the line. And, you know, God wasn't in like the earthquakes and the fire and the windstorm, right? He's just in that small whisper. Yeah. And it reassured me like, hey, I'm here, you know, and so many times it's like we're in that pit, we're in that valley, you know, we think we're alone, but we're not, you know, it's just a lot of the time we just take focus off God and we forget, you know, where he's at because we're in the darkness. You don't just because you don't see him doesn't mean he's not there. Right. So I want to go back real quick. You had a lot of themes of with mental illness and, you know, being in the pit and being in the dark. So do you see any like correlations or similar themes to maybe some of your past life to anybody that you interact with at the mission?
Absolutely. So when I was going through college, I had some internships that I worked with, and one of those was Open Heart Women's Shelter. So yes, absolutely, I did see, you know, similar situations like with mental health is a big thing.
Right.
Anywhere you look, anywhere you see, anyone you talk to, I mean, people go through some really heavy things in their life, some really traumatic situations, and you know, sometimes like they lack the support, they lack family, they lack just information, just like knowing like, you know, this is out there and this is real. And also like they doubt themselves and they're embarrassed or they're shameful, you know, whatever that the case is for them. But yeah, I did see that a lot. And, you know, my heart went out to those women. I was, because I could see myself in some of them.
Right.
I could see the depression, the anxiety, the PTSD, you know, and like they lost their kids or they were in abusive relationships. Like I could relate to a lot of those, maybe not all the way, but definitely in some of those situations.
Absolutely. Sure. What do you think like a common coping mechanism that you see for whether it was for your past self or you know, any of the women that you interact with right now? What do you think is like a common like coping mechanism?
A healthy coping mechanism?
No, like maybe what they're what led them to this situation. Like, you know, what's some negative coping situations that maybe kind of furthered going into the darkness, right? Or furthered your trip down into the valley?
I would say, I mean, I see a lot of addictions, you know, that would be a big unhealthy coping mechanism that I see a lot. People reaching out for something like a substance that will just kind of take away that pain, right? Whatever they're feeling, the hurt, because it's overwhelming. Yeah. And I do see that a lot. I mean, I did it. I drank, and I'm not proud of how much I consumed, but I was in a place where I was just it was so dark and scary that just felt like an outlet for me. And I do see that often in the women that I work alongside, and I see, and they talk about, you know, like they open up with their stories and they talk about addictions and things. And my own husband, you know, like he has an amazing testimony and story, that he has had addictions and in the past. And, but yeah, and it can suck you in very quickly. And before you know it, you're just in this dark, deep hole. Right. And you're having to crawl yourself out of that hole, and that's really hard.
You kind of trade in one pain for some other pains when you're trying to like mask, right? Because really, that's a lot of us are trying to do, right? We try to escape maybe some of the pain or some of the mistakes that we've, you know, made, and with that escape, right? Whether it's with addiction or, you know, whatever, and we're really just trying to mask pain, but in the long run, we end up hurting ourselves even further. And there's a lot of emotions, whether, when you're going through life, there's so much emotions. And I think, I've said it a lot here on the podcast, is that transformation, when you're trying to get out of the valley, it can be so emotional, right? Like,
Yes.
even as I'm going right now, I'm trying to change and focus a little bit more on like muscle building, right? And then it's like, so the scale, which I've lived my life for 4 years by the scale, and that number goes up a little bit because you're trying to add muscle, and it kind of messes with you emotionally a little bit. You're like, wait a minute, why is it going up? And you freak out. And so transformation can be very emotional. So what are some of the biggest emotions that you think as came up for you during your transformation?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, mental health has been a big part of my life. That really led me into a lot of shame and guilt that I placed upon myself. And I made some very poor decisions that cost me losing 2 of the 3 children I have. My 2 from a previous marriage, Summer and Junior, who are now 8 and 9. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to see them in 8 years. So losing them, I lost myself. And yes, when I was able to care for them and they were in my care, I wasn't myself. I wasn't Sasha. And I wasn't the mother that they deserved to have. I would say from the postpartum depression to a toxic, abusive marriage at that time, I was not surviving. I was failing. And I became this woman that I didn't recognize. And I can honestly look back at her and see the hurt. I can see the pain. I can see the anger, anxiety, PTSD, and depression just all around me. I really felt like I was trapped. And, I imagined becoming a mother. Like, that was always my dream, always my goal. I love kids. And I often said that I wanted 7 kids. I used to watch this show called Seventh Heaven. Mm-hmm. And my sister and I we would get home from school and the show would be on. And I just saw this family having a house full of kids and I was like, wow, that's amazing. And it's just like a dream for me, because I babysat kids growing up. My sister Shiloh, your wife, I looked out for her throughout our entire lives together. We were inseparable, even though sometimes we didn't always like each other. We still had the best of time. But I was involved in youth group, Sunday school with, little kids, small children. And when I had my own, Josh, I slipped into some very dark places. And when I had my own, I never thought that would ever become possible. Like that I would be in a situation where postpartum depression, it was just never on my radar.
Right. And
I had no idea what that was. I had never heard of it. And after I had my first, they did talk about postpartum depression just briefly.
Right.
And then they gave you paperwork and stuff to go over at home. But I was just so ashamed, that I had these feelings and that I couldn't communicate it because it was really embarrassing. Right. And it was definitely a time in my life that was scary. And it was a time where I went into a mental hospital later, and I was arrested in that same hospital. And later down the road, then I was convicted. But once I was diagnosed postpartum depression, along with depression, anxiety, and PTSD, that's where I really learned about my mental health and really taking that seriously because I wanted to get better. Right. I didn't want to be this person that was just stuck in this pit of darkness.
Right.
I really wanted to just get better and be better for myself, for my kids, and get back on the right track. And I really found through that I wasn't alone in that journey of becoming well, which was definitely reassuring through that process.
So what was one of the first steps? So after you realized, okay, I want to be better. I want to be a different person. What was one of the first steps that you took towards, that improvement?
Well, God is a big part of my